Hi! Learning is indeed fun. And welcome to my vlog. By the way, this is Amadil, and for today's vlog, I am going to share with you what is the nutrient cycle and how nutrient cycle differ from energy flow. And also, I am going to share with you what human contribution to this cycle. So without further ado, let's start our discussion. So let's start this discussion by defining what is nutrient cycle. So a nutrient cycle is defined as a cyclic pathway by which nutrients pass through in order to be recycled and reutilized. The pathway comprises cells, organism, community, and ecosystem. In the process, nutrients get absorbed, transferred, released, and reabsorbed. It is a natural recycling system of the mineral nutrients. Nutrients consumed by plants and animals are returned to the environment after death and decomposition, and the cycle continues. Soil microbes plays an important role in nutrient cycling. They decompose organic matter to release nutrients. They are also important to trap and transform nutrients into the soil, which can be taken up by plant roots. Nutrient cycling rate depends on various biotic, physical, and chemical factors. Example of nutrient cycle, which are carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, water cycle, and oxygen cycle. So how does nutrient cycle work? During photosynthesis, plants combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sunlight to produce simple sugar and carbohydrates. But just like human, plants can leave sugar and carbohydrates alone. Fortunately for plants, there is a rich soils of nutrients right under their feet, and the soil parents material on the organic matter. When dead plant materials or organic matter fall to the surface of the soil, it gradually decomposes by microorganism nutrients and then released into the soil and plant available for it. The next generation of plant then absorb these nutrients, and so nutrient cycle begins again. We humans remove nutrients from the cycle when we take food from our fields. But these are easily replenished with microorganisms harvest nutrients from the parent materials, the rock and pebbles, the much smaller particles which is sand, silt, and clay. At the molecular level, the parent materials comprises large lattice structure which holds nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, boron, calcium, iron, and all of the other nutrients that plants need. With the balanced soil of food web in place, plants can control the nutrient cycling that happens in the root zone. They invest some other sugar and carbs they produce during photosynthesis and of the soil in order to feed bacteria and fungi. This causes bacteria and fungi population to increase dramatically. The bacteria and fungi would then get busy harvesting nutrients from the organic matter and parent materials, absorbing these nutrients into their bodies. Predator microorganisms are attracted and they begin consuming the bacteria and fungi. The waste left behind by these predators contains an abundance of nutrients and plants available for them. These are easily absorbed into the plant roots, so that plants get a good return in its investment, exchanging sugar, carbs, and return for all the other nutrients that requires. This result in a well-nourished, resilient plant and the nutrients in food for us human. With the balanced soil food web in place, plants are able to access all the nutrients they need on demand simply because their varying compounds release into soil. So this means that farmers no need to waste money buying and applying fertilizer. The soil food web costs very little to maintain by the comparison. Having nutrient plant results in greater yields and improving the quality of the photos. Reduced costs and greater yields result in dramatically increasing profit from many farmers who have used the soil food web approach. The nitrogen-based fertilizer that farmers use are made using huge amount of fossil fuels. Only around 40% these organic fertilizer get absorbed by the crops. The rest is either volatilized, polluting the atmosphere, or it runs off polluting our river, lake, and ocean, causing algae blooms and dead cells that are major environmental problems. So restoring the food web release the nutrients-rich food from the consumer, increase profit for the farmers, and also benefits the environment. Next is the additional information of the common cycle.
Three main cycles that we have to look at: the carbon cycle, the water cycle, and the nitrogen cycle. The carbon cycle is actually pretty easy. So, we understand that there's carbon dioxide in the air. So why is it in the air? Well, when we combust fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide into the air, and that's one major source of it in the atmosphere. As you already know as well, organisms will respire, and when organisms respire, as the equation would suggest, it also releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, the carbon dioxide is absorbed by plants to photosynthesize, okay? And basically the carbon dioxide that is used, the carbon inside the carbon dioxide gets transferred and transformed into chemical energy, whereby the carbon exists in nutrients like proteins, carbohydrates, and things like that. So when animals therefore eat the plants, they're actually attaining the carbon, and so the carbon gets cycled through, right? Again, when animals die, they decompose, and decomposition of matter will also release carbon dioxide into the air. So that's a full cycle of how carbon moves around from one thing to the other. The water cycle is actually pretty simple as well, so let's take a look at rain, right? Rain, a fancy word for rain is precipitation. So the rain will fall down and will make its way to the soil. From there, it can make its way inside plants, and the water is the water is released through transpiration back into the air. We also have something called percolation, which is basically when the water seeps into the soil, like so, and makes its way back into a lake, river, sea, or whatever it may be. And from there, it evaporates back into the atmosphere, and it condenses to form clouds. And when there's too much humidity and too much water, then we get precipitation. So that's one full cycle there. So the nitrogen cycle is a little bit more complex. So let's take a look at nitrogen gas that's in the atmosphere. The really important thing that you have to understand here is that nitrogen gas alone is very unreactive. Plants cannot just simply absorb nitrogen gas to make nitrogen compounds because it's simply unreactive. So what the plants do is absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrates or other nitrogen compounds that are more reactive enough for the plants to use. Right? So the important distinction being nitrogen gas is in the atmosphere, but in the soil you have nitrogen compounds. So what happens for the nitrogen gas to become nitrogen compounds to begin with? Let's take a look. We have lightning, right? When you have the lightning, there's a huge amount of energy there. So what happens is the nitrogen ends up reacting with the oxygen in the air to form nitrogen oxides. Okay, so nitrogen oxide is a type of nitrogen compound that the plants can directly absorb and use at their will. We also have fertilizers that we make, humans make to put into the soil, and the fertilizers will contain, nitrogen compounds again to allow the plants to absorb and use as well. Some other natural methods would be nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So what the nitrogen-fixing bacteria is that it converts the nitrogen gas in the air into ammonium compounds. Okay, so the ammonium compounds are just sitting in the soil, and what the nitrifying bacteria will do is actually convert the ammonium compounds, which actually contain nitrogen as well, and convert that into nitrates. And the nitrates are what gets absorbed by the plants to be used. Okay, so the plants will then get eaten by animals again, so the nitrogen will actually be transferred to the animal that eats it, and when the animals die, the nitrates or the nitrogen compounds and things like that will end up back into the soil. Now, there's something called denitrifying bacteria. So what denitrifying bacteria is it basically converts nitrogen compounds in the soil and makes it into nitrogen gas, releasing nitrogen gas or nitrogen back into the atmosphere. So it sort of basically does the opposite of what a nitrogen-fixing bacteria would do. So, this can be slightly confusing, but just understand that the nitrogen-fixing bacteria will convert the nitrogen gas into ammonium compounds, and the nitrifying bacteria will then convert the ammonium compounds into nitrates that the plants can use. And the denitrifying bacteria will convert nitrogen compounds into nitrogen gas, releasing it back into the atmosphere.
So now, let us discuss what are the contribution of humans to this nutrient cycle. As what I've discussed earlier, nutrients are continuously recycled in a natural ecosystem. In recent decades, population growth and resulting to human activities such as large-scale farming have caused some significant changes in nutrient cycle. With harvesting crops, nutrients are removed from the soil. For centuries, dung from animals have been used as a fertilizer to restore the nutrients back to the soil, and also in many cultures. Also, human extracta have been recycled back to agricultural fields, hence nutrients went back into the soil at roughly the rate they have been withdrawn. However, with the introduction of waterborne sewage, this cycle has interrupted and replaced by a linear system that transports nutrients away from soils and into water courses. Furthermore, agriculture also influences the nutrient cycle in another way. Agriculture accelerates land erosion because plugging and tilling disturb and expose the soil, so more nutrients drain away with runoff. And flood controls contribute to disrupting the natural nutrient cycle. Typically, river floods would redistribute nutrients-rich sediments to lower lands where it is again available for ecosystems. Instead, dams trap sediments or embankments confine it to the river until it washes out to sea. So, too much nutrients from eroded soil and from human and animal waste end up in lakes and oceans where it spawns massive uncontrolled blooms of algae. Once they die and fall to the bottom, they decay starves other organisms of oxygen, creating dead zones and contributing to the depletion of fisheries. Essentially, the human alterations to the nutrient cycle leads to an excess of nutrients in aquatic ecosystem and a serious lack of nutrients in agriculture. Worldwide, more and more soil are depleted of nutrients with serious consequences to agricultural production and food security. So in summary of the discussion, nutrient cycle means or describes how nutrients move from physical environment into living organisms and subsequently are recycled back to the physical environment. This movement of nutrients, essential for life from the environment into plant and animal and back again, is a vital function of the ecology of any region. In any particular environment, the nutrient cycle must be balanced and stable. If the organisms that live in the environment, they are to flourish and be maintained in a constant population, and that was according to Martin 2010. In the discussion also, it was explained that currently, large parts of humankind influence the nutrient cycle in such a way that we remove nutrients from the land and discharge them into aquatic environments. On the one hand, this leads to soil depletion on the land, and on the other hand, an overabundance of nutrients results to a pollution of water sources.